Judith, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And thank you for publishing your research article, which is called Integrating Research and Pedagogy, an Exploratory Practice Approach, which you published this year, 2017. Could you outline what it's about and who might be interested?
Okay, so the people who might be interested in this article are, I think, anybody who's interested in practitioner research, anyone who's interested in exploratory practice as a form of practitioner research, and anyone who's interested in EAP, so English for Academic Purposes. I think those are the main groups of people who would be interested, but also anyone from applied linguistics, language education. I think it speaks to a lot of different people within the same general field. When I think about what the article is about, I've been involved with exploratory practice for a number of years, and I was particularly struck by one of the principles of exploratory practice, which I thought has not really been looked at in any great depth. So that's principle number 7, which is talks about minimizing the burden by using normal pedagogic practices as investigative tools, integrating research and pedagogy. And I was thinking, well, okay, this sounds all very nice in theory, but what does it mean in practice? And particularly, what does it mean in my situation, which was a very, very intense and intensive EAP, English for Academic Purposes course at a university in the UK. And I thought, well, what happens if we try out exploratory practice in this kind of hothouse situation? I must say, actually, I was a little bit cautious about implementing exploratory practice because I thought possibly the principles could be inimical to the EAP scenario, so where you have these very goal-oriented students and teachers. Perhaps exploratory practice might not be as focused as they might like. So I was interested really to probe that principle. So essentially what I did was I worked with a group of teachers, myself included, and learners who were on a pre-sessional course. And I'll call that course PS10 for short. So it's a 10-week pre-sessional. And the students were going on to study master's degrees in healthcare, in business, an MBA, and design, as well as education and engineering and so on. In the article, I focus particularly on the experiences of 2 teachers and 6 learners. And one of the things that I think makes exploratory practice very distinctive is the idea that the learners are co-researchers alongside the teachers. So we're researching together rather than anybody being the object of study. We are all researching together. So the learners who I was working with, I'll call them, so one was called Gina, and she was going on to study an MBA. And her puzzle, the thing that puzzled her particularly, was why can't I remember and use vocabulary? So she was very proficient in her language. She was a good language learner, there's no question about that. But she was really struggling to remember and use accurately, and I think that's quite important to note. It's this thing about using the vocabulary that was specific to her field. 2 other learners that I talk about in this article were Meow and Cheer, and they were going on to study MAs in healthcare, and they were particularly curious about why can't I speak English after all these years of study. Again, They were both very proficient. They were going on to do MAs. They were good at language, but they were really struggling with speaking fluently, speaking accurately, speaking confidently. So in both cases, the students used their normal pedagogic practices to investigate. So in EAP, we would normally do some kind of project work. I think that's very standard practice for pretty much any EAP course. So with Exploratory Practice, we took this normal pedagogic practice and we tweaked it to change the subject of inquiry from the kinds of things that students often look at, which are things like, smoking habits in British pubs or use of ready meals in the UK. And instead, it was the learners themselves who were investigating. They set the questions themselves and they investigated themselves. So they did the kinds of things that we normally do, questionnaires, research, so questionnaires, interviews, surveys, going to the library. But it was to find out something that was relevant to them. The interesting thing, I think, was that all of the people who were involved went from a sort of cautious interest at the beginning to becoming very, very enthusiastic. They became really excited about exploratory practice, so both the students and the teachers. And the best way I think I can describe it is that one of the teachers talked about it being a gentle way into heavyweight research. What he pointed out, and I think he was right, was that people who come from very traditional backgrounds with traditional ideas about what research is find it very difficult to grasp the idea that practitioners might be effective researchers, and that this is in fact a very valid form of research, something that is directly relevant to the people concerned. So these students, these teachers, they were working in an academic context, and they really felt that the work they did was preparing them for their academic future lives. So I end the article by critically examining some of the ideas of exploratory practice and looking at some of the challenges we encountered, because I'm not trying to say that it was easy or in any way sort of smooth. Any form of research has difficulties, I think, that you need to acknowledge, and also to look at the opportunities that arose from doing this, and there were a number. So in the end, I think I conclude that this notion of integrating research and practice, I think that was one of the reasons that the practitioners liked it so much, was that it was not wasting their time, it was not distracting them from the business of learning and teaching, which was in front of them. It was helping them with their future academic goals. And so this integration of research and pedagogy, of looking at assumptions about research, about what is research for, who does research, these were the kinds of conclusions that I came to.
Thank you very much. So where would I find your article?
The article is published in a journal called System, and it came out earlier this year. I think it was June 2017.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you.